Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the second of our Gender Equality and Education Exchange for East and Southeast Asia Forum. We're grateful that you had, and pleased that you can join us today. Welcome to those who are coming back from last week. Welcome to people who are new to this process. We are really delighted to spend the next couple of hours with you. We have a full agenda and are keen to get going. So let's start with the poll. Over to you, Joanne, and those with the poll. I should have said, I'm Nora Files. I'm head of the UNGAI Secretariat. Now, Joanne, over to you.
Thank you, Nora, and welcome everybody. As Nora said, to those of you who were here last time and to those who are new. Those of you who were here last time know that we started with a poll so that we know who's in the room and what kinds of interests and backgrounds you have. And so we're going to do the same thing this time. And as Nora, let me also step back and say I'm Joanne Sandler. I work with UNGAI and I am tuning in from New Jersey, which is next to New York City. And so if everybody could respond as quickly as possible, whichever one resonates the most, you consider yourself very experienced in, and I can see you're already in it, education, gender equality, planning processes, activism, advocacy. And we see the numbers. We're going to give it another couple seconds. You just have to click one. Okay, are you responding in the poll?
Yes.
Good. Lang, did you stop it? Yeah?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. And so just to have a very quick look, 59% of people see that their major experiences in education, 29 in gender equality, 6 in planning, 6% in activism, 0% in advocacy. So preponderance in education. Any comments about these results? Any observations? You can say something or put it in the chat. No? Okay, take a minute to notice just so that you see where people align. And why don't we go to the second question? Yes, Simone, you could only select. Okay. Second question, your organization is, you need to choose government, civil society, bilateral, multilateral, or other. Okay, we have people signing in from Hanoi, from Mexico City, from Timor. Okay, so we have the largest number from multilateral and bilateral organizations, interesting, 26% from civil society, 11% from government, 16% from other. Does someone who's from other want to say or type in what other means? What are some examples of other? Anybody who chose other? Ah, a partnership, I see. Very good. Any other examples of other? No, okay. Well, good to know that we have a really generous participation of people from multilateral and bilateral. We really are relying on government people to share your experience, since a lot of the education planning is related to the work that you lead, and so thrilled that civil society organizations are represented and that we can talk about the kind of advocacy required to make sure that education planning is gender responsive. Let's go to the next one, Liang. Next question.
Sorry,
Yeah.
1 second. Then stop.
Oh, sorry. Coming up? No?
Yes, it should be coming up, but
Okay, it looks like we're not getting it. Hello from Laos. We have very good representation from all over the region, from Vietnam, from Manila. Can we go to question number 3, Liang, or is it you having a problem getting it up?
Yeah, I couldn't get it up for some reason. Just give me a second. Or we can.
I did it just now. Can you see it?
Okay, it's good.
Yes,
Yeah.
good. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Ritu. Okay, next
Yeah.
question. Have you participated in an education sector planning process? So if you could quickly answer, great. Wow, a lot of people have. That's wonderful. We're going to rely a lot on your experience. Okay, more answers. Good. Okay, so 65%, the vast majority have participated in education sector planning processes, 35% not, and nobody wonders what an education sector planning process is, you all know, which is great. So again, we're going to rely a lot on people who have, and for those who haven't, really good to be asking questions about what it involves and how we make sure gender equality is represented. Okay, I think we have one more question. Can we go to the next one? Okay. And so in this question, we want to know, you have been able to work on gender equality and education priorities through, have you been participating in consultations? Do you have a job in government that actually requires you to work in education sector planning? Do you coordinate with government? Do you receive funding from government? Or, and we know that this is the minority, have you not been engaged in really education sector planning work? And so vast majority looks like have had some link, or at least, let's see, 40% have participated in consultations. The percentage keeps going down. Okay, 42%. 4%, one person's job requires it in government. And then there 44% are coordinating with government. And again, 24% have not been engaged. Any comments on this? It's clear, right? We have a group that actually has a fair number of people who understand this context and who can really illuminate what happens in that process. So thank you. Liang, I think we're done with the poll.
We have one more. One
oh,
more.
we do?
Sorry.
Let's do it.
Okay, sorry. 1 second.
Okay. Why do you work in education or gender equality? Is it because of your curiosity, your responsibility, your sense of purpose, the desire to be of service to others? You just like playing and recess, or some other reason? We asked this question last time. Oh, I love that one person likes recess. And yeah, I think as last time, the biggest motivator is sense of purpose, 48%, more or less an equal number, responsibility and service to others. And so, yes, the purposes that can be served through work on education, and especially linking it to gender equality and other issues that can be advanced through education. Great, thank you. Thank you, Liang. I think you can take the poll off now. I'd love to ask if anybody has any comments on anything that you've learned about who's in the room. And let's just say that throughout this, this webinar, you can speak, you can offer your insights, or you can type them in the chat, but we love to hear from you. Okay, we're going to stop sharing this. Great. Okay. Thank you. I hope you have a better sense of who's in the room. And as many of you know, this webinar is the second in a three-part series. Last week, we looked at some of the emerging gender equality issues, opportunities, and innovations in the region, had a very rich discussion. This week, we're going to dive more deeply into what are some of the processes and partnerships that underpin work to create a gender responsive education sector. And then next week, we hope many of you will return, is a time to really look at strategy, collective responses, and what next? How do we use what we learn to make sure that education sector planning is gender responsive? I'll go to the next one, and I will turn over to my colleague, Janet Wong. Janet.
Thank you, Joanne. Hi, everyone. I'm Janet Wong, and I'm co-facilitating today's exchange with Joanne. So our learning outcomes for all the three engagements will be, by the end of all the three engagements, we will have increased interaction with one another on gender equality in education. It's COVID now. COVID is not going to leave us very soon, so it cannot be business as usual. And we'll be able to look at emerging priorities on gender equality in the context of COVID. There will also be opportunities for you to learn from one another and from you to draw resources from one another. You will have the chance to think collectively on strategic actions to advance gender equality in education planning. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Janet. We wanted to very quickly recap some of what came out of the last meeting because participants worked on two different questions. One about what are the innovations that you've seen and experienced in gender equality in education, and the other was what were the priorities in the COVID and post-COVID environment. On the first, related to innovations, it was really fascinating to see the range of very specific innovations that people from all the countries that were represented from the region contributed. And they fell roughly into 5 categories. People talked about developing gender sensitive curricula. There were very good examples of that. Recognizing intersectional discrimination and developing specific services, whether for rural, in rural areas, for indigenous groups, for people with disabilities, students with disabilities, LGBTI students. So there was a wide range of looking at intersectional discrimination and how education could respond to that. The third one was a number of examples on engaging communities, engaging parents in gender equality and education. The fourth was opportunities to take a promising innovation and bring it to scale. We all know how challenging and important that is. And then the fifth was working on policy, the kind of policies that underpin gender equality in education. When we talked about COVID, the impact of COVID, and what the priorities needed to be as countries rebuild, 4 things came up. One, the importance of addressing the digital gender gaps in access, in digital literacy, etc. The second was the importance of holding on to gains that have been made and that could be threatened as economies are struggling to right themselves. The third one related was a discussion of public financing and how we understand the kinds of budgets that are needed to advance gender equality priorities in education. And finally, the importance of responding to the impacts, the gendered impacts that COVID has revealed, whether that is related to increases in GBV and the impact of students, girls, boys, and all of those on the gender spectrum, early marriages, and other kinds of gendered impacts. So very rich discussion on all of those, and we'll try to build on those in the discussion that follows. Janet, over to you.
Thank you. The slide before, please. The one after, please. Sorry. So here is the agenda for our exchange today. We will be looking at new opportunities to strengthen gender equality in education, and we will have a speaker from the Global Partnership for Education. And then we move on to a quick review of gender responsive aspects of education sector plans, focusing on East and Southeast Asia. And then from there, we will have a fun exercise on what is gender blind, gender responsive, or gender transformative, drawing from some of the conversations we had earlier and examples provided in these conversations. And lastly, we'll move into Zoom rooms to have a discussion amongst ourselves and to learn from each other what we see as a gender responsive or transformative education sector planning process is for you. Next slide, please. So here are the conditions for exchange and learning. We invite you to add to this list as you see fit. Firstly, please take care of yourself. If you can't hear us, let us know. If you would like to speak, unmute yourself. We are all part of creating this learning space. And so we contribute to the safety of ourselves and the safety of our colleagues here. Each of us has a rich resource to offer. So listening respectfully is one way of tapping into that rich resource. Be curious, ask questions. There's really no right or wrong. This is a space for us to explore some of our thoughts, share ideas, and ask questions that emerge. Notice the power of and. The word and opens up a lot of conversations and options for us and for others. So try it and notice the difference. As we are not able to see each other always, please say your name and your organization before speaking. Make your comments brief. Time is really limited. Mute if you're not the speaker. And if you have any technical issues at all, please contact Jada. Over to you, Joanne.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So hoping that those workshop agreements make sense to everybody. Again, if you have any questions or comments on those, don't hesitate to put those in the chat. And now we are very pleased to introduce Jorge Ubaldo Colin Pesina, who is calling in from Mexico City. He is the education specialist for gender equality with the Global Partnership for Education. And he is going to introduce us to some of the changes in the way that GPE is working and what the opportunities for advancing gender equality are in GPE supported strategies. So over to you, Jorge.
Thank you so much. I would just like, first of all, to verify that you can see my my first slide and that you can hear me.
Perfectly.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Joanne. As Joanne mentioned, my name is Jorge Colin. I'm the education specialist for gender equality at the Global Partnership for Education. And today, let's say this session, this GRESP session is exciting for many reasons, but one of them, and personally, it's exciting because it's the first GRESP session, together, of course, with the session last week, in which we are starting a new operating model. So a new operating model that it's called GPE 2021-2025, which not only builds on our previous work, but it's going to put gender and gender responsive sector planning really at the center of our work. Okay, there we go. So our new operating model is built on 4 clear principles. Education as a human right, which means we should work to have every child, regardless of their ethnicity, their gender, their national origin, be able to access education. Second, putting gender equality fully in the center of our work. And this is going to be fundamental for the way we interpret our objectives, our mission, our goals, and to the way that we understand gender responsive education sector planning. Because we are going to build on the idea of gender equality, not only through the planning, but the implications that planning has on the next stages of our sector work. The third pillar is the development of effectiveness through alignment and harmonization. And this really builds on the idea of being a partnership. So having different stakeholders in the table. And the fourth is mutual accountability. So being highly responsible of our work and of the effectiveness of our work. From these 4 pillars, today we're going to be concentrating in one of our key objectives, which is the strengthening gender responsive planning and policy development for system-wide impact. This means that through gender responsive planning, we are going to be able to influence policy. We're going to be able to influence what kind of programs we finance, and we are going to influence the level of outcomes and the outcomes that we are looking to benefit or to alter, right? And this has to be at a system-wide. This is not a niche intervention that we want to improve. This is not a research project per se. This is a system level impact, and this has to be a sustainable impact. For what? For our clear vision of a quality education for every child. Now, why do we have gender equality in such a prominent element of our operating model? Well, first of all, because gender, even if we take it as the most basic measure, let's say, of parity, of access to primary, gender continues to be a very important axis to determine the level of access. So knowing the gender of someone will tell us more or less their odds of accessing primary education, even with this very basic indicator. And this shouldn't be the case, right? We shouldn't have 130 million girls estimated to be out of school, even before the pandemic, even before the before the effects of this pandemic materialize. And because of the subset of countries that GPE works with, this is going to be around 60% of the countries that we work with. Girls lag behind boys. Now, this is not necessarily the case in the region, in the Southeast Asia and the Pacific. In learning, for example, now girls outperform boys, right? Both from the assessments that we know from PILNA and from SEA. This is no longer the case. But if we were able to break this graph into subgroups, meaning refugees, poor and marginalized, special needs, we would see even a stronger link between gender and the ability to access education. So that's why we have to work towards understanding the priorities and understanding the barriers. So we are very explicit in understanding the role of gender in identifying the barriers and in addressing them. So how we are trying to do this within the new operating model in GPE? First of all, by hardwiring gender equality into our operating model. So it's not one area of work, it's supposed to go all along our work. So have entry points at every door of GPE's work. In addition to that, the board has already approved a targeted financing window. So a financing window that will be dedicated exclusively to gender equality with a strong focus on girls' education for those countries in which girls continue to lag behind boys in a very significant manner. So what does this mean for our day-to-day work? Well, this means that we're really going to be trying to build on these three domains. So strengthening gender responsive planning and policy, which is in a way the bread and butter of a session like this. For what? So this would be to identify barriers, to be able to support gender responsive planning and policy across different actors, and considering and expanding regional initiatives. I don't know if you have been in contact with this GPE initiative, but there is the Knowledge, Innovation and Exchange Initiative, KICS, which tries to gather different regional actors precisely to share these good practices and to share knowledge across the different actors in the region. So taking a stronger ownership of what we know. Another very important initiative for this discussion would be Education Out Loud, which supports coalitions of NGOs in the different countries that we work with to bring civil society to the table, right? And this is going to be fundamental for mobilizing coordinated action, coordinated and inclusive, because it's not only to coordinate with other development partners, is to be able to coordinate and to listen to the priorities of civil society. And I think this is going to be very important, hopefully going forward for every country where we work at. And finally, strengthening the capacity and adapt and learn, not, let's say, moving from the idea of teaching to the idea of learning, really, and being able to use our joint sector reviews, which are almost annual or biannual meetings where we discuss the progress of the sector. So to be able to use these meetings to be very clear into where we are lagging behind in terms of gender equality and how we can improve and how we can address all the different barriers to education for both girls and boys that may lie outside the education sector. So such as child marriage, gender-based violence, either in school or outside of school, or early pregnancy. I would like to leave as much time as possible for questions, and I would like to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you. That was very clear. I'm just going to open it up to see. I see that Nora actually typed in a question. Are there any advocacy partnerships with GPE in this region? I'm not sure if, is that a question for Jorge or for others?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
I don't know if it's a question for others, but if no,
Please.
I'm happy to add. Yes, there are partnerships with coalitions of NGOs in Southeast Asia and the Pacific, and I'll be happy to share the full list by email. There are a couple. For what I
That's great.
the one that I've been working the closest is an alliance of civil society organizations in the Pacific Islands, located in the. But I'll be happy to share the full name.
So as follow-up to this, we can send out those advocacy partnerships and make sure people know that they exist. I'd like to ask the nearly 50 participants that are here. I see another question. It says Siameo is working with GPE and UNESCO on SDG 4.1 specifically for children with special needs. Right, and is that Ethel? Are you asking, are you just contributing that, or is there a question that you have about how that relates to GPE?
It is just a sharing because you're asking for advocacy partnerships. And then I would like to share that we have currently in the KICS program, working with GPE and UNESCO Bangkok to develop special modular programs for special education needs. Yeah.
Great.
And I later I will share about our current findings on gender. Thank you so much.
That's great. Okay, Nora, you're prompting Jorge to tell us a little bit more about the joint sector reviews. And Jorge, maybe you can also say what a joint sector review is.
Yes, of course. So as I mentioned, the global, let's say our name is Global Partnership for Education, and we try to put a lot of emphasis on the partnership, right? So what this means is that we, as GPE, we're never going to implement a program ourselves. It's not going to be one of our priorities. One of our priorities is going to be to have different actors sitting in a table to discuss what the priorities are and to discuss where the potential financing from GPE should go. So what does this mean? This means that a group of local stakeholders focused on education, coordinated by the government, is going to meet regularly to discuss the priorities, to discuss the potential program to be funded with GPE resources, and to discuss the priorities as stated in the education sector plan. It's this group that is going to be leading the development of the education sector plan. And who leads this group? The government itself, the national government. These are national, let's say, national groups. So it's the government that must take ownership of these processes and lead in the development of these processes. Furthermore, these groups are intended to be inclusive. So while we have the government, we also want to have these coalitions of civil society organizations. We want to have other donors. We want to have also, in a number of cases, education institutions. So local universities, large public universities, representatives of teachers' unions, representatives of, in countries where private education takes a very big role, such as, for example, in Haiti, we have representatives of private schools. So once we have this group and we have an education sector plan, which is when the gender responsive education sector planning process is going to lead us to, we need to assess regularly how we are progressing towards the objectives stated in this education sector plan. And where are we falling short? It's also very important to understand where we are not reaching our objectives, right? And these reviews, it's what a joint sector review means. Joint because we're doing it with everyone. Everyone that is on the table is reviewing together. It's reviews, and sector because they are specific to the education sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge, and hoping that maybe you could take your presentation down at this point, hoping that everybody, and as we saw, we have a diverse group with a fair amount of knowledge of these processes, and what Jorge is presenting is a new opportunity for people who work in education and are gender equality specialists and advocates. This creates a new leverage point to advance the kinds of priorities and innovations we talked about last week. For those who are gender equality advocates and who are working from the outside to advocate for stronger attention to specific issues, whether, as we discussed last week, it's addressing the gender digital literacy gap, or curriculum reform, or intersectional discrimination. What Jorge is presenting is an opportunity to engage in a process that actually comes with financing and partnerships and coordination that could advance the priorities that will create new opportunities for gender equality in education. So that's an important opportunity that we're hoping, as we discussed today, the analysis that goes into this and also the strategies that you might be thinking about, and then next week going even more deeply into the strategies. Jorge's presentation lays out very concrete opportunities. We want to move from there to Nora. And so Nora, turning over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, Jorge, you did an extremely good job of setting up for this next conversation, because we're now going to talk about what do we mean by gender responsive education sector plan. What does it look like? What are the criteria or the characteristics? What are we hoping to make sure happens within an education sector planning process that is gender responsive? And that will actually make it all that much easier for that local education group to move ahead their gender agenda and to put gender into the joint sector review and all of these other important things which will follow and lead to actually building a gender equitable in education system. So now please do use the chat. Write questions if this is if you have them, if something's not clear, if you want to raise something. Everybody who's facilitating is going to be quickly reading these things and bringing them back to my attention. So the first slide is just an introduction to what here are two questions. What are the key criteria for gender responsive education sector planning? And then what is the experience of East and Southeast Asia? Okay, that's where we're going in the next 8 or 9 minutes. Next slide, please. So now what are the key characteristics? You heard last week about the fact that there is a guidance on gender responsive sector planning that Ungai spent an awfully lot of time putting together, and then spent the last 4 years traveling around the world and introducing the process to ministries of education. So according to that guidance, the key characteristics of a gender responsive education sector plan include 6 factors. 1, that is informed by gender analysis. Second, that it includes a participatory and gender sensitive stakeholder consultation process. Jorge started speaking about the nature of who's around the local education group table, all the diverse sector actors who would need to be consulted in the design of the education sector plan. Thirdly, that the education and gender responsive education sector planning process reflects strategies and lessons learned from before and integrates gender across everything that's within that plan. Fourthly, it is backed by adequate financial resources to implement gender strategies that find that the finances and the budget are aligned with the the strategies and the programs which are aimed for addressing and advancing gender equality. That number 5, that the education sector planning process and the plan itself is backed by the necessary institutional capacity, that there is a gender unit or other way of providing expertise to the Ministry of Education to do research and to advise on what are the gender issues in the country and how best to address them, and other necessary institutional capacity within the ministry and outside. And finally, that the sector plan is strengthening, sector plan process is strengthened through gender-sensitive monitoring and evaluation. And let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So now let's talk about the experience of countries in this region. In our past experience in face-to-face workshops, we always invite participants to work within national delegations, to work together to do their own self-assessment of the current education sector plan. Usually the discussion is very lively, not everyone agrees with the analysis, and it's also very informative about the practice of sector planning and also what's in the plan and what's not in the plan. Well, sadly, we were not able to do that this time, and we invited a colleague, a gender specialist with experience in the region, to do this analysis on our behalf. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. Some of the trends and a few of the highlights are examples of innovative experiences. So now I tried to color code. I'm not so good with this, and you see sort of, not really, green, yellow, and red. The red is really the least progress is made there. Green means we're really making we have some good lessons to talk about, some good examples, and the orangey yellow is sort of in between. In general, across all of these areas, here, as in every other part of the world, we do not see very strong gender responsive sector plans. It's just, we're just getting off the mark at this point. And if we did an analysis of any set of countries around the world, we would get, similar to this one, a patchy story. Gender analysis is one of the two which I highlighted as one of the more strong areas for the countries in East and Southeast Asia. I'm just going to share a few of the examples. Oh, I should have said, we took a subset of education sector plans which we could get our hands on and which we're current. And so we reviewed the plans from Laos, PDR, Myanmar, Mongolia, and East Timor. We saw some interesting examples of gender analysis in the Laos PDR education sector plan, focusing on sex disaggregation, including by gender and ethnic group, for a few indicators at least, and that was to illustrate intersecting disparities. So that was a good example. That same education sector plan from Laos PDR has some analysis of the bottlenecks, the gender bottlenecks, which they used to understand what was going on. They said that students were increasingly disinterested in attending secondary school due to lack of perceived job opportunities for both girls and boys. So they were looking at both of those, both. They looked at distance. They considered that another bottleneck was distance to travel to attend lower secondary school as a significant barrier for some students, particularly girls. And that low completion rates of girls in upper secondary may be partly due to the need for boarding away from home and early marriage. Now, in all of these categories, a number of the sector plans said something like, this is an area of need, and yet didn't go on to say how they would address it. And in this case, the same, one education sector plan recognized that deeper analysis is needed of the reasons for girl and boy dropout, but they didn't provide that analysis. So now let's talk about the second criteria, and that is participation and gender-sensitive consultation. Any of you who have been involved in sector planning know that this actually is a very consultative process in terms of bringing in, bringing in the experience and the perspective of many other actors. In reality, across all of the 4 plans we read, there is no clear evidence of involvement of ministries of education, gender units, ministries of gender, national committees on the advancement of women, women's rights groups, girl or youth-led networks, gender experts, or any other gender actor. Which was quite remarkable, given that some of them, I mean, most of them have an annex, and one mentioned over 180 people, but no one actually noted whether or not they were women or associated with gender action in some way. Now, the third criteria is about strategies and lessons, and I have coded this as green as one of the two areas where there's more good examples than others. East Timor, for example, had a comprehensive inclusive education program with 7 gender-focused activities aiming to tackle a range of issues: institutional inequality, the learning environment, looking at water and sanitation, gender-based violence, the gender balance in the teaching force between teachers and school principals, and they did a section on social norms, looking at school-related gender-based violence. And another one also did both strategies, which are mainstreaming strategies, and targeted interventions, which was a really more sophisticated and interesting approach. Sorry. Now, the fourth category, I was tempted to color it red, but because it's about financing. And frankly, there is no information in this area. There was nothing in the ESPs which spoke about the allocation of budget for gender strategies. We actually didn't get any information, so we just considered it an area for development. Now, some sector plans would be accompanied by a separate budget. And also we know the real budgeting work happens in the operational plan and the annual plan, and budget. So that's why I colored it yellow. It may have been a little hasty of us to be critical about that. The fifth category is about capacity, institutional capacity. And this was another area for development. Many countries acknowledged that capacity needs, but they didn't have any strategies of how to address them. In one example, gender budgeting for equity was noted as a capacity development challenge, but this was not even reflected in the capacity development chapter. So it's likely to have been lost along the way. There was not an easy way to follow up on that one. So finally, about the sixth one, gender sensitive monitoring and evaluation. Well, across the board, monitoring and evaluation was found to be pretty slim, a real area for development. One education sector plan included a baseline and targeted targets for a few indicators, disaggregated by sex and location. For example, the percentage of schools with inside toilets for boys and girls. And another ESP included one gender indicator in the entire results framework. The indicator was teacher and school leaders' gender ratios, but that was just one out of many others. So clearly more work to be done there. Now I'm going to stop at that point, but I think we may have a minute or two for questions if anyone wants to raise one.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Nora. That was brilliant. Any comments or questions for Nora? We do see that in these planning processes, as you said, Nora, there's often, good analysis, but when it comes to budgets, when it comes to capacity, the analysis evaporates. And so, and we do have participants here who have a lot of experience with the ESPs from the countries you mentioned, wondering if any of them would like to comment on what you found when you reviewed the plans from those countries.
Or if I may, any of the coordinating agencies or development partners who also are actively involved. I know we have people from UNICEF in various countries. If they have an experience they'd like to share, that would be really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Anybody?
It's Mike Lally from Vientiane in Laos. I was involved with the Department of Planning in drafting the sector plan that you've reviewed just recently. With the financing plans, by the nature of sector plans, they're very much at a macro level. And so when you look at the financing tables, you don't see anything specific linked to gender responsiveness. But in the actual models that are used to cost the actual plan, that's where gender targets are set and then costed. So the plan does address gender responsiveness financing, but it's in the underlying model rather than the presentation of data in the final report. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And Michael, that is extremely interesting and helpful to say, okay, well, when we want to start to, I'm going to go back to the word advocacy or advocate for those targets, those financial targets, it's in the conversations around the development of those where we need to, whoever it is who's quite keen will become involved in advocating for that work to be done. What's amazing about sector planning is it takes a lifetime to understand the mechanics and how best to advocate for advancing gender equality through the process. And it's great that there are so many around the table who do this on a daily basis and can share their experience and can work together at the country level towards those priorities which Jorge had identified earlier.
Because now what Jorge is saying is that there will be a requirement, right? To be able to get GPE financing, GPE will be asking for stronger representation of gender equality. There's a question, what are the issues that gender responsive education really address? Because we also talk about gender transformative. Excellent question, which we're gonna actually cover in the next session. So thank you for doing that. And then how do we consider to overcome the traditional concept of gender equality among local communities? Nora, I don't know if you want to take that question.
Well, that's not really, that's an enormously important question because we know that families and communities are so core to implementing policies, meaning that they either support the policies to be implemented or not. And the fact that many communities, the understanding of gender and the role of women and men in society and girls and boys is conservative. It's not moving ahead as quickly as we might hope. So depending on your entry point, that's where we bring in our civil society community partners who can work at the community level and to who can engage community leaders in conversation. Actually, some of the most important work is outreach to community leaders and religious leaders who set the norms for a community and what the roles and rights of women and men are, and can engage with communities in conversation. I think it's a really important question, and it is part of our larger discussion of the country priorities and how we're going to make sure that all girls and boys get into school and remain and succeed there. There's another question about I was wondering how about financial targets are set. That may be a conversation for next week. We are hoping to have a focus discussion on gender-based budgeting, and maybe we could invite someone to speak about the setting of financial targets. I think it's an important one. But we don't have we haven't set it up today. However, we are coming back in 1 week, and gender-based budgeting is on the agenda.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, and others are thanking you. And I know there are more questions. Actually, in the next session, we're going to be looking at some of the definitions of these terms that we were using, as a colleague from Myanmar asked. So, and we're going to come back to the presentations that Nora and Jorge offered when we go into Zoom rooms for some deeper analysis. But before we do that, over to you, Janet, and thank you again, Nora.
Can I just say before we move into this, there's one little point I'd like to respond to in the chat, and then we'll be able to not lose that. There is a request that we make sure we highlight the good practice, the good cases or stories. And sadly, Ethel, you were not here with us last week because the entire day, the entire session was highlighting what are the good practices, the innovations, the experience which has been demonstrated to move ahead this agenda. And the good news is we're putting together a report so you'll be able to see the record of that. And because of course it's all the two sides, what the innovation is and where we have to do better. So thank you for raising that now. Sorry to interrupt you, Janet, and over to you.
Thank you, Nora. Now's the fun part. We're going to take a recess and have some play. Thank you, Ching, for raising the questions of the difference between gender responsive and gender transformative in education. We will go into some examples where you will decipher for yourselves what are the differences between a gender blind initiative, gender responsive initiative, and gender transformative. This is a slide that presents these terms as a continuum. In terms of gender blind, it's exactly what it is. It does not see initiatives that do not consider any differences. It usually takes a one-size-fits-all approach. Gender responsive has been a term we've been using throughout this exchange, and gender responsive initiatives are those that respond to differences and looks at specific needs. And because gender cuts across social groups, gender responsive initiatives also address intersectional inequalities. And the third on the right, gender transformative, these are initiatives that looks at power differentials. Who has more power? It answers the question of who has more power. And it works at disrupting and challenging some of the power imbalances that we experience in the work that we do. So the boundaries between particularly gender responsive and gender transformative is porous. It depends on how we are doing our work, how we are working within the field of education. So we are going into some examples that we have been having conversations around from the last exchange as well as previous workshops. And there will be a poll for you to respond to some of these examples as for you to choose whether these initiatives are gender blind, gender responsive, or gender transformative. Shall we start the first example, please? Liang, can we share the poll, please? Okay, the first example, student council members trained in leadership and child rights and human rights. What is that to you? So 79% of you say that it is gender blind. 7% think this initiative is gender responsive, and 14% feel that this is gender transformative. Can someone from the gender blind category share why you consider this a gender blind initiative very quickly? Anyone? So not clear on gender desegregation because it does not discuss any gender implications explicitly. It doesn't include gender equality. Thank you. What about those who said that this was a gender responsive initiative? What might be the reasons you chose that option? Those who considered this a gender responsive initiative. Can you either mute your mic and speak or type it in the chat box? Why is this initiative gender responsive to you? Or those who said this was gender transformative? Can any one of you, of the four who responded, can you tell us why?
Yes, man. It's me, Dedanton from Myanmar.
Sure. Tian,
Yeah,
please.
in the statement, state council members express state council member only. That's me, not restriction of boy and girl, man. So then it's possible to most majority will be women. If so, it will be the gender transformative. It's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Tian. Any other response to that? So often when we talk about training, we will ask who are the members of the student council members, as Tian Tan Tun had said. Unless we specify, we don't know who they are. And in terms of the training content, when we do training around leadership, child rights, and human rights, are these done from the perspective of gender equality? Again, there's no information on this. So I would think that as I would agree with many of you that this is indeed a gender blind initiative. Can we move on to the next poll, please? Okay, the second example, the education sector plan commits to increase the proportion of female teachers in junior secondary schools as a strategy for improving access and retention of ethnic minority girls in school. So 83%, 85% now think it's gender responsive. 80% think it's gender responsive and 20% gender transformative. Again, can we know why you consider this a gender responsive initiative? Can you type your why in the chat box or speak? Why do you consider this initiative gender responsive? It addresses a gender issue but doesn't necessarily challenge the power structure. Thank you, Shama. It aims to promote girls' rights. Yes, indeed. It's targeted at girls. It didn't tackle the gender norms, so I suppose that's why it's not gender transformative. It's not related to the question where we have many female teachers. It identifies girls' involvement. It's
So,
addressing.
may I ask a question?
Sure.
So when we are all the time I met this problem. If we see through the terms of gender, it's mean not only girl, not only boy. Am I right?
That's right.
If 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 it is right, if you in the statement only express girl means not gender equality. That's the problem in my mind. So especially in our country, more than 80% of teachers are female. So if we try to promote gender, we will focus on why. So it's a little bit contrary with the global view. And also another thing is student. Number of students in the whole Myanmar, majority are also high percentage are girls. That's why when the globally we are trying to get empower education in our country, it's me white power education. But even in UNICEF, no focus for white empower education. So in my mind, gender is all the time expressed both white and gay, or maybe not expressing white and gay means equality, everyone. So chance given, not separate white or girl. No, it's my thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Tin. Indeed, gender is not just about girls, but it's boys and girls and other non-conforming genders. And in this example, it's looking at improving access and retention of ethnic minority girls. So it's also looking at the specific needs of a specific group of girls in school. And the initiative is hoping that bringing in more female teachers in junior secondary school would improve ethnic minority girls' access to schools. So some of you say, many of you say it's gender responsive. Others are saying that it's gender transformative. And gender transformative, it says in the chat box, because it's already included as a strategy, challenges decision-making power people and it turns to action. Thank you. In a way that bringing, having a specific focus on ethnic minority girls is indeed challenging some of the power differentials. And so again, this very clear divide of gender responsive and gender transformative could be further debated. So it's not always clear cut whether an initiative is this or that, but asking the question of the why and the how and the where this initiative is going to and how it is done would be very helpful. Thank you. Shall we move on to the next one, please? The last one. Okay, this is an interesting one. Gender neutral bathrooms for queer students. Is that gender blind, gender responsive, or gender transformative? Okay, 7% of you say it's gender blind, 18% gender responsive, and 75% say it's gender transformative. Can we start with gender blind? Why do you consider this initiative gender blind? Why do we consider this initiative gender blind? Or if you had said that it's gender responsive or gender transformative, can you tell us why? Can you share why? No one's typing in the chat box, so I can't see what you're typing in the chat box. Anyone?
Yeah, Janet, I can see somebody shared.
Okay. It's gender responsive because it creates choices for LGBT. Thank you. Gender transformative, it provides a bathroom where all genders could use. Yes, indeed. This is an example of responding to different needs, very specific needs of safety and ensuring safety for queer students. It's also an example where the gender binary is being challenged, the norm, the very strong norm of boys or girls, where then the LGBT community are left out. So we will stop this exercise here, and you will keep in mind some of these concepts. They're really useful concepts. At the same time, they are not always clear cut, and the opportunity for you to try and test some of these concepts in the next session will be there. Thank you. Joanne, back to you.
Thank you so much, Janet. And I think that we see that two things. One, Michael makes the point that for the previous example, that he thought it was transformative because of the link between having more female teachers. And I think, as you're saying, Janet, the notions of transformative and responsive in particular are very context specific, right? So what might be transformative in one context could be more responsive in another context. The basic point, though, which I think you all get, is that if we now link back to Jorge's presentation, right, of what is it that GPE is changing, and how are there more opportunities and also more demand for intentional gender strategies, Nora's review of what education sector plans in 5 countries are putting forth, and Janet's review of what these terms mean. So we want to kind of now pull this all together, because the challenge is how to be intentional about what kinds of education planning you're doing and what are your goals. Are they to be gender responsive? Are they to be gender transformative? Gender blind, I would hope, is something that people would want to avoid, because there are consequences to disregarding gender. And so what we want to do now is offer you a lens, a lens that can help with analysis, with planning, and with strategizing, and also actually with outcome mapping and evaluation. We're going to use this lens mostly right now to talk about strategy. So, there are many gender analytic frameworks and frameworks for doing gender analysis. The Gender at Work framework is just one. It's one we use, those of us who are associates of Gender at Work use this a lot. We find that it helps to reveal things about strategy and analysis. And so we want to offer it to you, and then we're going to explain it briefly, and then you're going to break up into Zooms and have the opportunity to use this and to pull together all of the things that we've been talking about, from Jorge to Nora to Janet. Okay, so this framework is a 4-quadrant framework, and it helps us to understand change at individual level at the top, institutional at the bottom, formal and visible change on the right-hand side of the framework, and informal and invisible change on the left-hand side of the framework. Can you go to the next slide? And please, as I'm speaking, do not hesitate to type in any questions that you have. And yes, I also wanted to thank Ian for putting up a really great resource, and hopefully we can make that accessible to everybody. Okay, so looking at this framework, as this slide says, the top 2 quadrants are about individual level change. So if you put together individual level change on the formal visible side, right, that is about resources, the resources that are available for gender equality. And resources can be schools, they can be education, textbooks, transport, scholarships, whatever the resource, teachers, right? Many things. On the left-hand side, which is the informal, invisible quadrant, at the individual level, we're talking about individuals' consciousness and capabilities, right? So whether it's consciousness about politics, consciousness about gender dynamics, consciousness about the ability to excel in math and science, or capability to excel in math and science. That is what the two parts of the top quadrant are. And I'll make this point twice. Often in planning, we favor the right side of the framework, the formal, visible, because those are things that you can see and they are things that you can measure. And we disprivilege the left side. And so when you think about that, it's very important not only to pay attention to how resources change for individuals, but also how consciousness and capability changes for individuals. Next slide, please. So at the bottom of the framework, no, sorry, that's right. Okay, is our systemic. So the top is individual, the bottom is systemic. And so again, on the right side of the framework, the formal, visible, the institutional and systemic aspects can be laws, policies, rules, regulations, guidelines, right? So these are the things that we establish and agree on, whether it's a education sector plan or an education law or an education policy. Again, something you can see, you can measure, it's very visible. On the left side, the all important social norms and deep structures. Now, this is the hardest thing to change, right? And it's also the most important thing to recognize, because these are the everyday practices and the deep structures that perpetuate gender inequality. And if you change a law and policy, and we have all seen this, that we pass really aspirational gender transformative laws and policies, and they don't get implemented. And that often happens because social norms and deep structures and individual consciousness and capability, which are on the informal, invisible side, sabotage what we commit to on the formal side. Okay, so if you go to the next slide to give you an example of how we use this, here's a very rudimentary mapping, right, of a process that might take place. So you might start with a gender analysis in the resources side. So the resource is the gender analysis, a gender analysis of curriculum, right, that identifies harmful gender norms. That would be a strategy. Let's say you're going into your planning process. You want to understand what the curriculum, how the curriculum advances or doesn't gender equality. You do an analysis and you find out that actually there are many harmful gender norms embedded in the existing curriculum. You might then, there should be an arrow actually that goes down to the laws and policies quadrant. We're still on the visible side that says, okay, we recognize that there are harmful gender norms and we need to revise this. And so the Ministry of Education issues policy guidance on producing gender responsive textbooks and reading materials, right? So we see the interaction between these strategies. Because of that, the Ministry of Education or other partners produce gender responsive texts and media to distribute to the schools. Not only that, however, because we're aware that we have to be also tracking what is on the other side. It's not enough just to produce the textbooks and distribute the textbooks. We have to understand what the impact of that is on things that are less visible. So what happens to the individual student, boys, girls, and others on the gender spectrum, right? In terms of their awareness, their behaviors, their attitudes, how do these revised textbooks that are intended to promote positive gender norms, how are they impacting students? So there would have to be a strategy to track those changes and learn. Likewise, we would have to see how does that ultimately affect the choices that different students depending on their intersectional identities, right? Not just that they're girls or boys, but across the gender spectrum, and dependent also on their location, their ability, their identities, et cetera, you know, how does that affect the choices that they make? So you see, these are all connected. Without doing this kind of analysis, you might tend to strategize on the right side of the framework. And so what we're saying, if you can go to the next slide, is the way you use this framework is to understand that that change is holistic. It's complex, and every action you take affects the other actions, right? And so you have to look at both the formal and the informal, the individual and the systemic. And if you have a holistic approach, you're working in all 4 quadrants and understanding the way they interact with each other. And that you can use the framework both to outline the changes you want, the outcomes you want, and the strategies that you will use. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So we're going to break up now into Zoom rooms. Before we do, and you'll have facilitators and people who have used this framework before in all of the rooms, but let me just ask if there are any burning questions before we send you off into rooms. Any questions? No?
Can you just remind us, please, how long we have?
I will, yeah. Okay.
Super. Thank you.
Good. Okay, no questions. And as I say, it won't be too late to ask questions when you get into your rooms. So you're going to have 20 minutes in your room. Each room will have a facilitator. So the task in the room is to identify key elements of gender responsive planning for education and how these elements are connected. So again, just to remind you, Jorge laid out what the new opportunities are in relation to partnership with GPE and financing from GPE. Nora talked about some of the advances that are already in some of the sector planning, and also some of the gaps, right? Whether it has to do with financing or consultation, et cetera. And then Janet gave us a breakdown of gender blind, gender responsive, and gender transformative. So as you're thinking about all of these things in your rooms you'll be brainstorming. So in an ideal world, what would be contained in gender responsive planning for education, both in terms of the process and the product? You'll have a facilitator. You'll be working with a blank framework. We encourage you to volunteer as rapporteurs to do report backs. And after 20 minutes, you'll come back into the Zoom room, into the large room, and we'll have 3-minute summaries from each of you. And just to say that the reason we're asking you to do this, that we hope that you'll see working with this framework, the range of strategies that could be possible and that you need. I think that's it. Janet, Nora, anything else before we break up?
I think we're
Not
good,
from me.
Joanne.
We're good?
That's good. We're
Okay,
good.
everybody, have a good trip and see you back here in 20 minutes.
13 minutes.
And does Sharon and does Sharon and Savivan have access to the documents? Why don't we?
I don't have access to the document, but I've made notes. Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. I think we'll be able to show the document. I'm not sure. Let's start. We may need to go 10 minutes extra, so I hope you'll all stay with us. It was an illuminating session. So group one, which was group one? I don't even know what group
We're
number.
group one, and we said Michael will report back, or rather, no, because you said his internet is unstable, so we have.
Sorry, my group is group one. Just Liang is keeping track, so he'll tell us which group you're in.
Okay.
So Shama, over to you. And just to say, we never got the framework. We saw somebody else writing into the framework we thought we were working on. So I'm afraid to say we are not able to use the framework. Shama, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna have to wing this. But as Joanne said while she was presenting the framework, when we did the brainstorming, we really did have to. We really planned along the right side, so along the formal and the visible, because again, that's the easier one to plan for. That's the easier one to brainstorm for, because that's the more visible part of the advocacy. First, we thought that features of a good responsive gender responsive sector plan is financing that is associated with the plan. Oh wow, there's a time. Financing that is associated with the plan. This is harking back to the person from Laos talking about that there's resources, but it doesn't have to be specifically out there. It could also be just associated with the plan. Along with this is also the this sector on adaptation of a national action plan with a dedicated budget and a budget based on the national context. In the Philippines, we have the gender and development budget, which is 5 to 10%. Oh crap. Yeah, sorry.
Good.
Yeah, so so that's included in the financing as well, like a sort of dedicated budget for gender mainstreaming and gender responsive planning. The second one, which is related to the third one, is having female leadership and education in the ESP process. We kind of also put that in resources, but also this could be in Q1, which is in consciousness and capabilities. There's definitely, despite women outperforming a lot of men in education, there's a lack of female leadership and education in the processes. There may be a few, and these are power women, but there's a need to really balance out the leadership aspect of education and planning processes if you're really serious about gender responsiveness. Along with that is, of course, the balancing out of genders in the teacher's profession. There are a lot of, for example, in Myanmar, they said that there are a lot of women that are teachers. In some contexts, there are more women that are teachers, and there's definitely a need to balance off the genders in the teaching profession. Maybe even if we want to move that over to quadrant 4, try to question whether or not teaching is viewed as a masculinity or teaching is viewed as a femininity, and then try to create an analysis and a sort of response to that, because it may be that there are a lot of men teachers because it's considered a more masculine thing. It's because of the authority of being a teacher, therefore it should be men that should be teachers, or whether it's because it's feminine, it's more nurturing, etc. And there are different analyses that could be put into that, but to put it in quadrant 4, it could be analyzed in that area as well. Number 4 is more on understanding what the real gender constraints are. And I think this actually is in all of the quadrants, because it's the start off point of where we are going to create our strategies, where we are going to create our proposals, where we're going to create our interventions. And this is something that is also very important across all quadrants. And then number 5 is the adaptation of a national plan of action, which is which is under quadrant 3. Yes, sorry, 1 minute left. Quadrant 3, which is a national action plan with monitoring and evaluation, and then identification of gender issues. Very classic planning process as well. Thank you. Sorry, I got.
Thank you, Shama. Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. And we see that you kind of circled through all the quadrants, which is great, and looked at the interlinkages.
Even without the framework.
Even without the framework. You're magical. Okay, group 2, we're not going to pause after each one, group 2. And Liang, you're timing each person so that when they run out of time, the buzzer will go off. Okay.
Yes, I'm timing on the side. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, who's group 2?
I think that was our group.
No, that was us. That was us.
Yeah.
Actually, Sharon and Sabinan, you're reporting.
Yep, we are. So you can see on the shared screen the discussion that we had, and we looked at resources. Is there gender responsive research? So we thought we actually really needed to understand the data and collect the data that would inform our gender responsive plan. An example was why girls don't go to school, or why girls don't continue to secondary school. So collecting the data is a good starting point, and it also becomes a resource that we can build our action plans on. We had a lovely discussion about sports for girls. What does sports for girls look like? And sports between girls and boys, and how does gender influence that? Are girls encouraged to play soccer, or is it chess clubs that we have that it's different skills that we're learning and supporting girls to have? We also mentioned under resources, gender responsive financing. So picking up on the point that Mike made earlier, that sometimes there's financing available, but it might not be transparently linked to gender issues. So that was what we discussed under the resources. For rules, policies and laws, we thought about this is how we can develop our action plans, review the action plan to make sure that it's gender responsive and that it's operationalized. So how do we actually make gender plans operationalized so that it's something that people don't have to think about because it's there in the plan? They don't have to make any links. It's clear, transparent and staged approach to how we input gender into our plans and into our curriculum and our education models. On the non-visible side, or the informal side, we had some points there under consciousness and capabilities. And again, thinking about what are the stories behind why girls are not in school? How can we gather those stories to inform future gender plans? And there was a lovely point made about the willingness, getting Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Education on board to think about gender responsive financing, plans, actions that are inputted. So our country's still trying to grapple with funding for all children, and that's their way of thinking, but not thinking if we make gender inclusive, gender responsive plans, that it might be a better educational environment for all children. And the last one, we started to think about the social norms and deep structures and said, what does our curriculum actually show? Does it have positive images of girls in leadership roles? Are girls seen as the teachers? Are boys seen as more of the action men or the engineers or other roles? So analysing the curriculum to look at what stereotypes are portrayed in those curriculums to tell us what we don't know in the gender, to include in gender. So just a quick summary of our discussion. We ran out of time.
Great, Sharon. Wonderful. Yeah, we got kind of booted out of our own room, but really great. Bravo. You did an amazing job. And Shama, you as well did an amazing job. So although we lacked the resource of time, you both really made up for it in your report backs. Thank you. And we saw the use of the framework. Okay, group 3.
That's us. And may I call on in our sister from Myanmar?
Yes, our group discussed about the gender responsive policy in education sector. First, we discussed about the individual level, and in the context of the capacity building and the capacity building, we do agree that teachers capacity building for teacher is very important, because one of our member, our colleague from Laos, he mentioned about this. Majority of the teachers in primary level are female teachers, but the school principal are less than 20%. So we have to emphasize on the teachers' capacity building in education sector. The second point we discussed about is the awareness raising for the gender equality and gender responsive policy in education. And because we have to, this is the reflection from Myanmar, because we have equal quota for the medical and engineering specialization in Myanmar. So we have to raise the awareness on the gender equality and gender responsive policy in education. The third point is we discuss about the resources, gender-based resources in education. We do agree that we need to emphasize on the curriculum, which is important for the individual awareness in gender responsive policy in education. Michael from I think Laos, he mentioned about the framework for the central level is very important in laying down the policy for the gender responsive and gender equality policy. That is why the central level is very important for the, in Laos, central level policy making is very important for the, to expand the school principal percentage in the rural area. These are our discussion from the group 3. I'm so sorry.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Actually, Joanne, we were able to put it in the framework.
Great.
I think Ritu was able to put it in.
Yeah, it's there. It's there in the notes. Yeah.
Wonderful.
We'll share it with you.
That's great, because post this we can do a consolidated framework and use that for the next session to start talking about strategy. You know, how do we actually move these kinds of ideas forward? So thank you very much, group 3.
I'm sorry, Ms. Kora, I can find the framework and the slide.
Is this group 4?
Okay. But Ritu has it, so we'll just give it to.
Excellent.
To yeah.
Excellent. Is this the next group?
Yeah. This is
group 4. Who's group 4?
Yeah, it's us. Rex. Does anyone else want to go ahead? Yeah. Okay. I'll do this. Yeah. So we were in the middle of still discussing when we got pulled out. So, so the resources bit. Yeah. So we started talking about how access to gender sensitive curriculum for teachers and everyone else is an important resource that needs to be there. So that was something that we discussed in the resources bit. And we could, as you said, pointed out correctly, that we were more on the formal visible part. So we talked about how deploying female teachers to retain ethnic minorities is a decision-making process. So it should come under the policies, rules, and laws. And if the policies for gender-neutral toilets are made, then they go into the resources. But first, it needs to be in the policies. And from there, it was pointed out that we need more gender-responsive school infrastructure. So we could not discuss much about it, but safe toilets for adolescent girls or other kinds of things which do respond to gender transformative or gender responsive ideas. And then we had like an intersectional lens whenever we are planning these policies. So there needs to be an intersectional lens to it. And so we pulled out a lot of examples from what Janet and Nora and her had discussed, and we talked about how different kinds of diverse groups need to be part of the planning process. and then minority groups and need to be consulted so we thought that these are policy things, but when we talk about community leaders or engaging minority groups, it has something to do with the social norms and deep structures because they're core to the community. And if it doesn't happen at the roots, it might not be gender transformative and might just be responsive. And so also changing books and the curriculum, we were a bit conflicted about placing it in the resources or norms because we needed to change the stereotypes around how people view women and their roles, like the stereotypical roles. And there was one we could put in the consciousness and capabilities, that was training for all people, like the teachers, students, parents, everyone needs to be engaged to change individual consciousness of all these people needs to be there. So I think that was mostly what we did. We couldn't get more. Sorry.
You shouldn't be sorry. You did an amazing job in an incredibly short time. Thank you, Bedu, and thank you to the whole group. That is fabulous. That is fabulous. Let's move now to group 5. Nora, is that? No, you were the first group.
Janet.
Oh, Janet, that must be your group.
Yes. Norcam is going to report back.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Janet, for helping me to type on the framework. So in our group, we have a large representation from Laos. So we just pick Laos as an example to analyze and put in this framework. So we, in the development of the education sector plan, we started with the gender analysis, which in the process, I think we also have raised the consciousness on gender, which also fall under the consciousness and capabilities. As an outcome, we also have the resources, like we have gender disaggregated data, disaggregated by ethnic groups, disability, which is also fitting into the M&E framework that we have to monitor the whole process and also the results of the ESDP. And we also have recently completed the revision of the curriculum for primary education level. So in that process, we also have been able to ensure the gender inclusion as part of the whole inclusive education processes. From the law and rules policy quadrant, so we also have an inclusive education strategy that is provide the guidance on how to translate the policy into the actions. And of course, in the ESDP itself, we have a good plans to enhance gender responsive actions throughout ECD, education, early childhood development through higher education level. And in the quadrant 4, when we talk about the deep-rooted and structure, deep-rooted social norm and structure, we also have village education committee development, that is the body that work closely at the committee level, hoping to transform the norms, the social norms, and especially in enhancing the access and enrollment in education at the village level. So I think that's broadly what we managed to discuss within a short time. And if the team would like to add anything, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Norcam. That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I think in the amount of time that the groups had, every group did such an extraordinary job, and not just in generating really interesting elements of what would constitute a gender responsive process and plan, but also in placing it in the framework and showing that actually there is that kind of connectivity and relationship between the different elements that you identified. Any comments from anybody? And Janet, Nora, Rex, some of the facilitators, I don't know if there's anything kind of overarching you want to say both about the content and the process of using the framework. Anything?
If I could just share the experience, I think an overview of all the 5 groups, it was clear that the visible part was easier to populate in terms of the gender at work framework. And even and you went further and deeper into questioning, even when there is a plan, from planning to financing to implementation to monitoring and evaluation, there are gaps. There are still gaps. And when there are high proportion of women teachers, the question of where does power lie? Leadership is still held by men, for example. So very good sort of, while the policies say one thing, you are going deeper to question what impact that makes. And in terms of the deep structures and social norms, it was good to see that many of you looked at some of these in terms of ethnic minority groups or LGBT students, as well as disrupting stereotypes. So I think if we had more time, I think going deeper into social norms and deep structures would be really exciting to see.
Mm-hmm. Really good point. And of course, if you were using the framework in an actual planning process, right?
Yes.
That's where, and I hope that participants see this, that's where you would start to see, okay, as Janet said, we've populated the right-hand side. What's the implication for the left-hand side? And the framework kind of pushes you in that direction to have to ask yourself that question, and then to go to the next step of what kind of budget do we need? What kind of partnerships do we need? What kind of advocacy do we need to be able to move this idea? Chan Samon is asking, can we have the resource where we can get the full? Absolutely, and we'll send you actually some background on the framework as well. Yeah, Rex is saying, agree with Janet, gets very interesting when we dig into the social norms. And just to do a little bit of an advertisement for next week, when you come back, we will have more time to dig into the social norms because you've generated such great material to work with next week. So a huge thank you. We've kept you for a very long time. Maybe if you want to very quickly write in the chat, did the framework make sense? Do you feel like you can use it, et cetera, et cetera? And you've generated a huge amount for us to work with over the next week as we plan for the next session. Jada is putting up the registration link and also the date of the next session. And I'm going to turn it over to Nora, I think, at this point.
Sure, thank you very much. As you're writing a few thoughts in the chat about what you liked about this session, or what you thought, what's left for you to want to talk about, what questions you still have, something you appreciated, though, is really what we want to learn from you through the chat. All I want to say is thank you so much. We are busy planning already for the next session. We will be focusing on strategies and also drawing on all the wonderful examples and analysis you've done this week, building on the stories we got from last week. So we will be moving forward in terms of what's next for you, how you take this work forward in your own space with your own work partners, and then reaching out hopefully to the others who you have met around the table. We do have this special cameo performance, something which will help us to think about gender-based budgeting, which people have raised as a particular interest. So make sure that that's available for you as well. Do register, invite your colleagues who weren't able to join if that would be relevant to you in your community. The more the merrier. If you like, register link is up there again, and we will come back to you with a few resources for your bookshelf or to inform your work. And I think that's it. I think that's all we have to say, Janet, except to thank you. It's been really a really great session today.
I think Janet, turning over to Janet.
Thank you so much. And Shama has already started the ball rolling. So if you could tell us what you appreciated about today's session, please, in the chat box. Shama has said, I appreciated the brainstorming sprint. Thank you, Shama.
Back to the end of the session.
All right, great. I think we'll leave this chat open for a few more minutes for people to put your notes in, and those who are needing to run off to more meetings, please feel free to do so. We look forward to seeing you next time. And till next week.
Thank you. Thank you. And,
Thank you
Nora,
so
can we
much.
just say thank you to all the participants. Thank you to the facilitators. Thank you to Jada, Liang, Ritu, Bedu, all the people who work to make the technology possible and the agenda possible. So huge thank you to all.
Very good. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.